Hey, how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? It's Politics with Laura here. Oh man, there is so much going on. But before I even get to that, check this out.
Mommy, because I thought we were supposed to conserve it.
Hey, this is Big Girl. Okay, I like that. I do. So before I get into what we're going to talk about, RFK stepping down and backing Donald Trump. OMG. Oh, I know his family is breaking dishes and just going completely and utterly berserk. But please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Let me make sure. Oh, good, everything's fine. Because yesterday I tried live streaming. It didn't go the way it was supposed to go. So I had to for today, and I'm sorry I'm late, trying to do some last minute adjustments. Okay. Oh, I'm struggling with streaming already. All right. Um. Whew, okay. All right. Now, before I really get into it, look, you could be Democrat or Republican. It really doesn't matter. But when you start saying things, I'm going to vote for Trump because I don't like Kamala, or I'm going to vote for Kamala because I don't like Trump. It's not about what you like. This is a time to where the country is extremely divided, either falling into the left or falling into the right. Now, I think we need to be somewhere in the middle because what Kamala Harris represents is too far to the left, and Tim Walz is beyond too far to the left, in my opinion. Now, for me, Trump is a moderate. And you might say, hey, politics, what, Laura? He's conservative. Don't you remember he was a Democrat? Remember that? Remember him going on an Oprah Winfrey show and him going to this place and having the rappers back in the 80s and 90s, having him appear in their videos, like the Bobby Brown song. Da 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 da, got to let it go. All on my. Oh, okay. I can't sing, but you got the gist, right? You understand what. So he was a Democrat. So now that he's a Republican, because the Democrats didn't want him. And my thought is this: why are the Democrats eating their own? You might want to stop and think about that. Maybe because they want to push an agenda that Trump was like, no, I'm not going there. But now his running mate, JD Vance, I think he's more to the right. I believe he is. Now, Trump, they called him MAGA. He got that name. They put him, they put that on him by saying make America great again. And we need that, whether if you like it or not, or whether if you don't see what's in front of you. We need to make America great again because we are sinking in a sinkhole. And that's just my humble observation, because I'm an independent and I'm observing that we're going downhill quick. But I digress. Before I get into what I'm getting ready to get into, please, as I said, like, subscribe. I do have memberships. Please, I have super chats. I have a lot of fun things. Help me out, help me grow. Subscriptions will help. Likes help. Please like, that's for free. And also, I do have a store. Check it out. I got some cool stuff there. So support me. And then if you want to directly support me, Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, Politics with Laura. Every dollar helps me build my studio. I'm trying to get better equipment and I need help. And I'm not too proud to ask, yo. Okay. All right. Having said that, now, before I even get into the video of looking at JFK's speech, because I went through a little bit of it, and he threw some gems out. He was telling on people. He told. Oh, and before I get into that, I want to say this real quick. Normally I don't do this, but this right here, I must say, when you say that content creators are in a small little niche and you're never going to go anywhere, this, that, and the other, well, right, there's your opinion, but I would like for you to understand that I hit every demographic and I bust my tail to hit every demographic. And you're like, Politics with Laura, you don't have to show that. You're right, I don't, but I would like for you to see I hit every demographic. And this right here is my analytics, a part of my analytics. And if you look up here, that right there is this month, July 12th to August. And if you see males, mostly males watch me, some females, I do tell on women. Yes, I do. They don't like it. And right here, 13 all the way down to 65, I hit every mark, whether if it's less than 1% or it's 26%. I hit every mark. So to that person, thank you for helping the algorithm. Thank you for disliking my video. It's okay. I'm not for everyone. You could subscribe, dislike, and comment. It all helps the algorithm. But on that note, I'm going to leave it right there. Now, having said all of that, thank you for coming. Now, here. Now we got to take a look at real quick. Now, this and Hillary Clinton, she, in my opinion, is behind all of this. And she's using her, how can I say, her cohorts, because each side has its own. Now that the Democrats are in office and they're trying their very best to stay in office, and just as Donald Trump was being slobber-knockered, so was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He was going through the same. And I really didn't pay attention until I listened to what he was saying. So instead of hearing me talk, let's check him out. Fair use some more. Live now from Fair Use, because I get in all types of trouble, Ah, man, it's not easy. Okay, now he endorses Donald Trump. So
I'm sorry to keep everybody waiting. 16 months ago, in April of 2023, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy.
No matter who you are, there are times it can be tough to be yourself when you have.
Sorry about that.
As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption.
And I have to do breaks. I do. I'm gonna keep this really short. Those of you who remember, because I remember that the Democrats was exactly what he said. I remember that, and that's one of the reasons why I was a Democrat. My mom, my grandmother, blase, on down the line. And even though that my mom and my grandmother were adults when they were allowed to vote, so even though that my great grandmother could not vote, but she still was a Democrat in heart. So I'll leave that right there. Let me continue on.
Option, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money. When it abandoned democracy by canceling the primary to conceal the cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party to run as an independent. The mainstream of American politics and journalism derided my decision. Conventional wisdom said that it would be impossible even to get on the ballot as an independent because each state poses an insurmountable tangle of arbitrary rules for collecting signatures. I would need over 1 million signatures, something no presidential candidate in history had ever achieved. And then I'd need a team of attorneys and millions of dollars to handle all the legal challenges from the DNC. The naysayers told us that we were climbing a glass version of Mount Impossible. So the first thing I want to tell you is that we proved them wrong. We did it because beneath the radar of mainstream media organs, we inspired a massive independent political movement. More than 100,000 volunteers sprang into action, hopeful that they could reverse our nation's decline. Many worked 10-hour days, sometimes in blizzards and blazing heat. They sacrificed family time, personal commitments, and sleep month after month, energized by a shared vision of a nation healed of its divisions. They set up tables at churches and farmers markets. They canvassed door to door. In Utah and in New Hampshire, volunteers collected signatures in snowstorms, convincing each supporter to stop in the frigid cold, to take off their gloves, and to sign legibly. During a heat wave in Nevada, I met a tall, athletic volunteer who cheerfully told me that he had lost 25 pounds collecting signatures in 117-degree heat. To finance this effort, young Americans donated their lunch money, and senior citizens gave up part of their Social Security checks. Our 50-state organization collected those millions of signatures and more. No presidential campaign in American political history has ever done that. And so I want to thank all of those dedicated volunteers and congratulate the campaign staff who coordinated this enormous logistical.
I'm sorry, I have to do a little break again, but wow, he got over 1 million signatures and people out there really doing what they believe was right by supporting him. Now, he said something paramount. His own party didn't want him. And he also said that the Democrats from yesteryear are not the same Democrats. These are different people. Oh no, struggle streaming. And why does that say excellent when this other one is okay? All right. So the Democrats of yesteryear and what is today are two different Democrats. And as he wanted to run for president, they didn't want him. So there's a lot like, wait a minute, there's a lot of strange stuff going on. So back to the video.
Feat. Your accomplishments were regarded as impossible. You carried me up that glass mountain. You pulled off a miracle. You achieved what all the pundits said could never be done. You have my deepest gratitude, and I'm never going to forget that, not just for what you did for my campaign, but for the sacrifices you made because you love our country. You showed everyone that democracy is still possible here. It continues to survive in the press and in the idealistic human energies that still thrive beneath a canvas of neglect and of official and institutional corruption. Today, I'm here to tell you that I will not allow your efforts to go to waste. I'm here to tell you that I will leverage your tremendous accomplishments to serve the ideals that we share, the ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign. I'm here today to describe the path forward that you've opened with your commitment and with your hard labors. Now, in an honest system, I believe that I would have won the election. In a system the kind that my father and my uncles thrived in, a system with open debates, with fair primaries, with regularly scheduled debates, with fair primaries, and with a truly independent media untainted by government propaganda and censorship. In a system, courts and election boards, everything would be different. After all, the polls consistently showed me beating each of the other candidates, both in favorability and also in head-to-head matchups. But I'm sorry to say that while democracy may still be alive at the grassroots, it has become little more than a slogan for our political institutions, for our media, and for our government, and most sadly at all for me, the Democratic Party. In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth. The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers...
Manufacturing Sustainability Insights, or MSI, is now available on the Autodesk app.
Turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot. The DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then when a predictably...
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to give it a break for a second. But he's out there naming names. But Beverly, you're absolutely right. Trump should know that RFK would be great, as quiet as it's kept, and I most definitely do agree. And I think the two of them should come together. JD Vance, he's a really good guy, but I think that him and RFK would bounce off great, and wow, that would be powerful. It's bad enough that his family is going berserk. RFK Jr.'s family is going absolutely berserk, and they may disown him. I don't know. But and as far as what he said about the courts, and it should be bipartisan instead of partisan, that right there is extremely true. There is, how can I say, money within the Supreme Court, and basically, I believe, I have nothing to back this up with, but maybe there'd be a little bit of a quid pro quo. I give you a little money, you give me this, and we can all be happy. I don't know, but that's just something that I think. But back to RFK.
The bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden. The same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, the role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineer.
And what he's saying is absolutely correct. I'm sorry, I'm struggle streaming, and this right here is really but I thank you with me. I really do. Here it says excellent, but on StreamYard, it's like something a little different. But he is calling people out. He's saying, oh, the people behind Joe Biden, and we have Kamala Harris. She never debated. She didn't get any delegates. It was all given to her. She was selected. No one said yay or nay. And she was one of the most unpopular people of 2020. So this says a whole lot. So we know from what we see that everything is stacked against the American people, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, but the American people behind the scenes. And he's telling it. Let me continue allowing him to tell it.
Neared a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced Chicago circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me. Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by abandoning democracy. They did it by suing the opposition and by disenfranchising American voters. What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates.
Before we go any further, where's the lie? Everything what he said was absolutely true. She never debated. She never did any interviews. And actually, people like Roland Martin and he look, he'd been trying to get Kamala Harris to come on a show for him to interview her, and she'd been ignoring him all this time. And all of a sudden, Roland Martin, Kamala Harris said, okay, Roland Martin, I want you to interview me. But she didn't even come on. But he raised over $1 million for her and still didn't interview. Now, the Black celebrities that gave all that money are like, hey, wait a minute, we're telling people to vote for you, Kamala. You better get out there and start speaking, doing some interviews, because people gave up money. I gave up money, and we're supporting you. And that right there is very, very true. So Kamala Harris is going to have to come out and do something, I believe. Okay.
What alarms me is the resort to censorship and media control and the weaponization of the federal agencies. When a U.S. president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it's an attack on our most sacred right of free expression. And that's the very right upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television networks exposed themselves as Democratic Party organs over the course of more than a year in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s. The DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC.
Now, before he goes any further, I remember that. I remember that because Bill Clinton was being pushed out there, and that was one of my first elections I voted in, and I did not like Bill Clinton. I didn't vote for him. I voted for Ross Perot as a Democrat. And yeah, I was a Democrat then, but I didn't always vote for Democrat. I'm struggle streaming. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep up with both. So Ross Perot reminds me, or Donald Trump reminds me of a Ross Perot back in the 1990s, because he was talking about Reaganomics and trickle down. I mean, it was great. But let me go back to RFK.
CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews from me. Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now, and I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fierce skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. The Democratic Party's censorship of social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America. Doty's previous 155-page decision details how just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and then invited the CIA, the FBI, CISA, which is a censorship agency. It's the center of the censorship industrial complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook or YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards. 2 days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook.
Before he goes any further, I have been had the same issue of being censorship on here and on Instagram, to where, how do you take 1,200 watch hours away? They did that for me, took down my videos because it didn't go according to policy guidelines. Telling the truth goes against policy guidelines. So it not only hit them, but it hit the average person sitting here trying to get the information out in truth. But let's go back to RFK.
Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that violates community standards, their community standards. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and democratic principles, and has joined this systemic attack on democracy. The media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation, but governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor. And I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint, because it's not. For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey that I signed up with. But I need to make these observations because I think they're critical for us doing the thing that we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like, and the assumptions about U.S. leadership around the globe. And are we living up? Are we really still a role model for democracy in this country? Or have we made it, a kind of a joke? And here's the good news. While mainstream outlets denied me a critical platform, they didn't shut down my ideas, which have especially flourished among young voters and independent voters, thanks to the alternative media. Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election but has no chance of winning. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats, with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it. My name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible. In fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption, breaking our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. I can say to all who have worked so hard the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the war on our...
Whoa. He gives his support to former President Donald Trump. Wow. Okay, let him finish up.
Children. I've already described some of my personal experiences and struggles with the government's censorship industrial complex. I want to say a word about the Ukraine war. The military industrial complex has provided us with a familiar comic book justification, like they do on every war, that this one is a noble effort to stop a supervillain, Vladimir Putin, invading the Ukraine and then to thwart his Hitler-like march across Europe. In fact, tiny Ukraine is a proxy in a geopolitical struggle initiated by the ambitions of the U.S. neocons or American global hegemony. I'm not excusing.
Before he goes any further, let me go ahead and say this real quick, because I covered that. I covered that about 1.5 years ago. Go back to my old videos. I give you foreign newspapers to where it names our current president now, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Nancy. Just go back in there, and then I show it to you. He's calling out these people, and he's saying, hey, these are the people that are doing this. So go back into my archives about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, and you'll see it. All right, back to RFK.
Putin for invading Ukraine. He had other options. But the war is Russia's predictable response to the reckless neocon project of extending NATO to encircle Russia, a hostile act. The credulous media rarely explained to Americans that we unilaterally walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear weapons treaties with Russia and then put nuclear-ready Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland. This is a hostile act. And that the Biden White House repeatedly spurned Russia's offer to settle this war peacefully. The Ukraine war began in 2014 when U.S. agencies overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine and installed a hand-picked pro-Western government that launched a deadly civil war against ethnic Russians in Ukraine. In 2019, America walked away from a peace treaty, the Minsk Agreement, that had been negotiated between Russia and Ukraine by European nations. And then in April of 2022, we wanted the war. In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops from Kiev and Donbass and Lugansk. And that peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed Donbass and Lugansk to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime change in Russia. His Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army, to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. These objectives, of course, have nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. Ukraine is a victim in this war, and it's a victim of the West. Since then, of Russia and both Russia and the West. Since then, we have, since tearing up that agreement, forcing Zelensky to tear up the agreement, we've squandered the flower of Ukrainian youth, as many as 600,000 Ukrainian kids and over 100,000 Russian kids, all of whom we should be mourning, have died, and the Ukraine's infrastructure is destroyed. The war has been a disaster for our country as well. We squandered nearly $200 billion already, and these are badly needed dollars in our communities, suffering communities all over our country. The Nord Stream pipeline sabotage and the sanctions have destroyed Europe's industrial base, which formed the bulwark of U.S. national security. A strong Germany with a strong industry is a much, much stronger deterrent to Russia, and a Germany that is deindustrialized and turned into just an extension of U.S. military base. We've pushed Russia into a disastrous alliance with China and Iran. We're closer to the brink of nuclear exchange than at any time since 1962. And the neocons in the White House don't seem to care at all. Our moral authority and our economy are in shambles. And the war gave rise to the emergence of BRICS, which now threatens to replace the dollar as the global reserve currency. This is a first-class.
Before he goes any further on that, I can most definitely attest, because I live in a sanctuary city and I do come across everyone. I come across Ukrainians. I go to the Walmart. There's some Ukrainians that work there, and I talk to them, and they tell me some of them do not agree with what's going on. And they're saying that, with Zelensky, okay, let me not get into that. I'm going to mess around and I'm sanctioned enough already, but he's laying it out. He's everything that happened, but we most definitely have to prepare, because as Joe Biden has been putting sanctions on rushing waters, I can't even say the name, rushing waters, it didn't work, because rushing waters has an agreement or circulating money through crypto. Circulating money, or they have to pay on a stock market for whatever they want to buy, Russian water, oil, gas, whatever it may be. They have to do it on a stock market or pay in ruble or gold. So whatever President Biden tried to put down and sanction Putin, it didn't work. In fact, it made them stronger. It put more people into the BRICS nations, to where there are countries in Central America. Heck, Mexico has an agreement with rushing waters in the Red Dragon country. They have a treaty of friendship. Look back last year. I did a video on that. And they're like, NATO, we have nothing to do with what you're doing. No, you're there by yourself. We're staying away from that. So he's dropping all these truth, but back to him.
Military adventures. And President Trump says that he will reopen negotiations with President Putin and end the war overnight as soon as he becomes president. This alone would justify my support for his campaign. Last summer, it looked like no candidate was willing to negotiate a quick end to the Ukraine war, to tackle chronic disease epidemic, to protect free speech. our constitutional freedoms to clean corporate influence out of our government, or to defy the neocons and their agenda of endless military adventurism. But now one of the two candidates has adopted these issues as his own, to the point where he has asked to enlist me in his administration. I'm speaking, of course, of Donald Trump. Less than 2 hours after President Trump narrowly escaped assassination, Callie Means called me on my cell phone. I was then in Las Vegas. Callie is arguably the leading advocate for food safety, for soil regeneration, and for ending the chronic disease epidemic that is destroying America's health and ruining our economy. Callie has exposed the insidious corruption at the FDA, the NIH, the HHS, and the USDA that has caused the epidemic. Callie had been working on and off for my campaign, advising me on those subjects since the beginning. And those subjects have been my primary focus for the last 20 years. I was delighted when Callie told me that day that he had also been advising President Trump. He told me President Trump was anxious to talk to me about chronic disease and other subjects, and to explore avenues of cooperation. He asked if I would take a call from the president. President Trump telephoned me a few minutes later, and I met with him the following day. A few weeks later, I met again with President Trump and his family members and closest advisors in Florida. In a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we are aligned on many key issues. In those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately, and fiercely, if need be, on issues over which we differ, while working together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences. But we are aligned with each other on other key issues, like ending the forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemic, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans and interfering with our elections. Following my first discussion with President Trump, I tried unsuccessfully to open similar discussions with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris declined to meet or even to speak with me. Suspending my candidacy is a heart-rending decision for me, but I'm convinced that it's the best hope for ending the Ukraine war and ending the chronic disease epidemic that is eroding our nation's vitality from the inside, and for finally protecting free speech. I feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children, above all things. In case some of you don't realize how dire the condition is of our children's health and chronic disease in general, I would urge you to view Dr. Carlson's recent interview with Callie Means and his sister, Dr. Casey Means, who is the top graduate of her class at Stanford Medical School. This is an issue that affects all of us far more directly and urgently than any culture war issue, and all the other issues that we obsess on and that are tearing apart our country. This is the most important issue. Therefore, it has the potential to bring us together. So let me share a little bit about why I believe it's so urgent. Today, 2/3, we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We're about 79th in health outcomes behind Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Mongolia and other countries. Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. And during the COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. And CDC's on Earth, we have the highest chronic disease rate on Earth. And the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So these were people who had immune system collapse, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from 1% to 66%. In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. There were case reports done about them. Obesity was almost unknown. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3% compared to 50% a year. Half of Americans have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president, I was a boy. Juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic, and the mitochondrial disorder.
Okay, now I will say this. He most definitely is absolutely right when it comes to obesity in this country. Now, what he's not saying, and I understand why, is that where this is coming from. I remember back when I was young, because I wasn't big. I was extremely athletic, but after when I had my children, that's when everything happened. They are putting steroids in the food. They make the food grow faster. They put steroids in, we eat it, we get bigger. So yeah, we are the fattest country in the world, and the chronic diseases, everybody and their mom and their dad are taking some type of high blood pressure or diabetes pills, and whether if it's type 1 or type 2, and it most definitely is a big issue. Now, he's not going to say, well, let's follow the money. He can't say that. These are the same people that are endorsing. So he is most definitely giving a disclosure, but he has to do it in a way to where he's not pointing fingers. He's just saying that it's simply a problem. And I most definitely get it. Now, when he was talking about the freedom of speech, our freedom of speech is almost gone because they're chopping away at the First Amendment. And no matter how much we fight to try to keep it, we have certain groups that gather all this power and are suing people and companies, and to where I can't even say the country that Putin is in or the country that Zelensky is in, because it becomes a problem for me because I'm saying it. And that goes with U.S. surveillance, but I'm going to leave it right there and let him finish speaking.
It caused diabetes, also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes. And it's costing this country more than our military budget every year. There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid: ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette's syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now, autism rates in kids are 1 in 36, according to CDC nationally. Nobody's talking about this. 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism. And this is a crisis that 77% of our kids cannot are too disabled to serve in the United States military. What is happening to our country? And why isn't this in the headlines every single day? There's nobody else in the world that is experiencing this. This is only happening in America. About 18%, and by the way, there has been no change in diagnosis, which the industry sometimes like to say. There has been no change in screening. This is a change in incidence. In my generation, 70-year-old men, the autism rates are about 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, 1 in 34. I'll repeat, in California, 1 in 22. Why are we letting this happen? Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? These are the most precious assets that we have in this country. How can we let this happen to them? About 18% of American teens now have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the old. Young adult cancers are up 79%. 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental million children on SSRIs. So what's causing this suffering? I'll name 2 culprits. First, and the worst, is ultra-processed food. About 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed. That means industrial manufactured in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists who many of them formerly worked.
Whoa. I'm okay. I'm really shocked that he said that. And he most definitely called them out because in my former professional life, I dealt with students that had ADHD, ADD, and they didn't know where it came from. It was something that just sort of came out. And that was back in the early 2000s. And he also was talking about how a lot of these childhood diseases that we were experiencing that just exploded, and the CDC came out and said that it came out from what I can't even say it, but you got exactly what I mean. And if you go back maybe at least about 5 or 6 years ago, they apologized for it. So that right there. And what's really interesting is the fat liver disease. I'm really shocked to hear that. That is really something for people that drink a lot, and you've got young people that have it that do not drink. But I'm going to let him finish saying what he's saying, and I'm just really blown away.
Worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s. Deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food more addictive. And these ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. Humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, our medicine, and our environment. Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies. The assault on our children's cells and hormones is unrelenting. To name just one problem, many of these chemicals increase estrogen because young children are ingesting so many of these hormone disruptors. America's puberty rate at age 10 to 13, which is 6 years earlier than girls were reaching puberty in 1900. Our country has the earliest puberty rates of any continent on the earth. And no, this isn't because of better nutrition. This is not normal. Breast cancer is also estrogen driven, and it now strikes 1 in 8 women. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults. Considering the grievous human cost of this tragic epidemic of chronic disease, it seems almost crass to mention the damage it does to our economy. But I'll say, it is crippling the nation's finances. When my uncle was president, our country spent $0 on chronic disease. Today, government healthcare spending is almost all for chronic disease. And it's double the military budget. And it is the fastest growing budget item in the federal budget. And chronic disease costs more to the economy as a whole, costs at least $4 trillion, 5 times our military budget. And that's a 20% drag on everything we do and everything we aspire to. Poor and minority communities suffer disproportionately. People who worry about DEI or about, bigotry of any kind, this dwarfs anything.
All right, everyone. The big news there, RFK Jr. out in Phoenix, Arizona, endorsing Donald Trump, suspending.
Okay. Oh my goodness. That was, I don't even know where to begin. I truly don't know, because RFK, he just laid it out and he just said, these are the issues. And he started with having his former party, the Democratic Party, not wanting him. And we have no idea what went on behind the scenes and the reason why that occurred. Then him leaving there to become independent and now supporting Donald Trump. I think the two of them will be the dynamic duo. Now, personally, I'm an independent, and whether my two choices were RFK or Donald Trump, not Kamala Harris. And he basically said that Kamala, he even tried to talk to Kamala Harris and her team, and they declined to talk to him, period. And she has been declining to talk to many people. Now, he talked to Donald Trump, and they had a couple things, and he discovered that they have a lot of things in common. Now, there are a few things that they do not agree on, but that outweighs what they do. No, it doesn't outweigh what they do agree on. And as he just laid it out, I am gobslapped. Wow. And as much trouble as Donald Trump has, so did RFK Jr. He had the same type of problems because he was being sued as well. Not as much as Donald Trump, where they're trying to put him in the clink, but they were suing him to slow him down, because he and Donald Trump were most definitely making a lot of headway. Now, he believes that he could have been able to possibly be president, just as Donald Trump had the possibility, well, still has a possibility of being president. Wow. I don't even know where to begin. So you can, if you want to come up, I have the StreamYard link down. If not, let me know how you feel and as far as what you heard, because that was very a comprehensive speech. Now, he is suspending his campaign. He's not dropping out. He's suspending. So wherever his name are on the ballots in those states, hopefully he can get something. But in a swing, I think it's about 10, 15 states that his name is not on a ballot. So he's going to leave it right there. He's not going to fight. So he doesn't want to be a hindrance to the Democrats or the Republicans. He doesn't want to do that, which I find admirable. And it shows great character on his part. Some other people would have said, no, I want to do it anyway. I'm going to destroy yada, 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 yada. Okay. But what are your thoughts? I'm just blown away. I am really blown away. But this I did not know, and I am floored on this one when he said the cigarette company bought out the food company and made the food addictive. Look, if you're addicted to Mickey D's, I'll put it like that, or all these other places, the food is processed, and you know, some of us have an addiction. Yeah, and it's horrible. And the food that has steroids and everything else in it, we are in trouble. And he laid that out. I'm amazed. I am completely and utterly amazed because he said all that. And also, as they tried to eliminate Donald Trump, he had threats against him too, to where President Biden did not give him Secret Service security. Now, Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, has security, Secret Service, because he's a former president. RFK Jr. didn't have any security at all. And then Joe Biden, President Biden finally gave him 3 people. No, I'm exaggerating. He has some security. Hey, how you doing, Sharon? Oh, you're very welcome. You are very, very welcome. I appreciate that. So between that and also, I want to touch back on the ADHD for a second, because he did say that a lot of these childhood diseases and mental health issues. Now, I went back to what you get when you're young, and you get it every 10 years. Whenever you go to school, you got to check on the school records for this. Go back a couple of years, as I stated earlier, the CDC apologized for and how some children have autism through also epilepsy and mental health issues. And it's really something. If you go back and they were apologizing for the children that had this back in 1992 to 1995. So those children are in their 30s now. Now, who knows what they're doing now? I could only imagine, but that's something to really look into. And I think the fact that RFK is endorsing Donald Trump is a big deal. Now, the fact that RFK went to Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris, for whatever reason, whatever her reasons are, it declined. She missed out big time. Now, just to add this to the mix, with the conversation with my friend yesterday, she told me that Dr. Cornel West, he how can I put it, because I don't want to mess her words up, but he declined to even reach to Donald Trump, but Kamala Harris is not open to him either. I don't know what's going on there, and it makes me think. This is just me thinking out loud. It doesn't mean that it's true. It's just me thinking out loud. I'm speaking for a friend. There may be a fix. There simply may be a fix. I hope and pray that we're not going to have these issues. I hope that we have not slipped into a manner to where we become a banana republic, that we need other countries to come in to make sure that our elections are fair, if you know what I mean. Wink, 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 wink. Okay. And I got a feeling that we are headed towards that. And the fact that Kamala Harris is not giving interviews screams volumes. And Donald Trump is giving interviews to any and everybody, and same with RFK. Now, Dr. Cornel West is also giving interviews too. So why are the Democrats? Okay, I got to be careful because they are most definitely heavily and seriously censoring me big time, as he said. The Democratic Party, which was shocking that the FBI sat down with the social media platforms, and it came out in Congress about what last year, to where they were grilled about the social media and the FBI telling them what they can do, should do, and they brought them into the cloak and dagger thing, and these social media companies gobbled it up, and they're like, oh goodness, we're doing something for the country. No, you got played. And a lot of us, were harmed by that, and there were some conservative Republican representatives and senators that relied on social media to reach out to their constituents, were not able to get their information out because they were shadow banned. I've been shadow banned. It's like you're there, but you're not. You're no one sees you, and they hide you. They put your stuff all the way to the other side of the social media world. You're not, and it's crazy. And that's what they have done. And that is a problem. And for the Democratic Party to do that, and yes, I'm saying the Democratic Party because they are the ones that are in charge and allowing this to happen, and admit it that it was a Democratic Party. Now, this is the big issue. This is a very big issue, to where they're censoring us, because we do have the freedom of speech, and we're quickly losing it. And I could only pray that we can get through this. Okay. Let me see, something else I wanted to say. The mental health, that was it. Oh, when he said that NATO, and yes, NATO is up to all of this in their eyeballs. In fact, a NATO should not even exist, because it should have been disbanded when, at that time called Russia, I'm sorry, the Soviet Union, when that collapsed back in 1992, NATO was supposed to disband, because they're like, well, we need to be here for the Western nations, because over there is communism and we're capitalism, and we want to make sure that communism doesn't creep in over here. Well, in fact, it crept on the other side, to where now Russian waters is, all of its former allies are now NATO countries. That is an issue. And when he spoke about the ukulele country, you know exactly what I mean. The ukulele country, and how how Zelensky was used, shall I say manipulated, and the people have been abused. And both sides, as I said in other videos, both sides could have been able to put an end to this due to the NATO manipulation. Now, I'm trying to be very careful what I say. I don't want to sound biased or anything. So if I do, please, I apologize. But with that right there, oh man, this is so big. But he just laid it all out. So if you came late, please watch the replay, because he let a whole lot out. He has nothing to lose at all. So, what are your thoughts? Please put something down in the chat, like, subscribe. Everything helps. And I do thank you. I do thank you for stopping by.